Hello, everyone, and welcome to Co-Creation Station, the podcast where we talk about the law of attraction, the art of allowing, spiritual magic, the mind-body-spirit connection, and how to best enjoy this mystical, miraculous, mysterious, crazy, sometimes confounding, but always incredible journey we call life. My name is Collin, and I'm located in beautiful, sunny North Hollywood, California.
My name is Stephanie Orlina. I am a transformational life coach, and I'm in San Diego, California.
Thank you so much for listening or watching. We just want to let you know we often mention Abraham Hicks and Esther Hicks on the podcast. If you're not familiar with those names, Esther is a speaker and author who channels Abraham. Abraham is described as a group of entities from beyond our physical world who share their wisdom by speaking through Esther at workshops and speaking opportunities around the world. You can find more about them online by searching on YouTube or whatever search engine you use. You can also go to their website, abraham-hicks.com, for more information. Each week we start our discussion from a different jumping off point. And speaking of Abraham, Stephanie, you sent me a recording on YouTube of an Abraham Hicks workshop. And I think you wanted me to listen to it for something else. But what I heard that was super important, and it was almost like a throwaway in the beginning, I hope she figures out that was an important thing and talks about it more later, because I think it's so huge. She made this comment in the very beginning that every person has their own pie, P-I-E, meaning I think so often we think that we are competing for resources with every other person on the planet, and if somebody gets a job doing something we want to do, well, they took our spot. Like there's a pie there's one pie for everyone, and there's not enough to go around, basically. And so if somebody gets that job that you really like, they got your piece of the pie, and there's not enough pie. There's no other piece of pie for you. And I think people think about money this way, like, oh, well, there's this big pile of money in the world, and it's limited, and lots of people have big pieces of pie, so I can only have a small piece, or I can't have any piece at all. And I think when she said that, like, everybody has their own pie, I was like, that's such a great metaphor, because it gets you out of that whole thing about, like, there's this one, gigantic pie for everybody that's limited and running out. And instead, we have our own pie, and it's got everything we want in it. It's got plenty for us. We don't have to worry about other people's pies because everybody has their own pie.
And that's the vortex. Like
Right.
everything we want,
Right.
each of us has a vortex. There's like, I don't know if Abraham ever says this, but I think like there is the vortex, and then there's like my version of the vortex that has everything I've ever thought
Yeah.
I've wanted in there. And I love the way the universe and law of attraction pulls it all together. So I've had these experiences where not only did I get one thing I wanted, I've gotten like 3 or 4 things I've wanted in one experience. And that always blows my mind.
Yeah.
But and I heard it differently, is that there is a vibrational pie. And I when I was listening to it this morning, I thought, oh, so someone takes a piece of the pie. There's one pie for all of us, right? Somebody takes a piece of the pie. And then I thought, energetically, another piece is replaced with that piece. So there's always plenty of pie. Like just because there's 8 slices and someone takes 7, then automatically when one's taken, the universe replaces that. And so the pie is always being replenished. That was kind of how I took it as well. It was
Yeah.
like,
I mean, that's probably the more accurate metaphor. But I think what I like about when she said everybody has their own pie is, I think just mentally for me, it helps me get out of what I've been programmed with, what our society and culture tell us all the time, which is, yes, there's one pie, but it's limited. It doesn't get replenished, and you better run and get
yeah,
as big a piece as you can, because if you don't get it,
and
somebody
that's
else will grab
scarcity mentality. That is deprivation mentality.
I feel like
And the
most people
universe is
associate.
infinite.
Yeah, I feel like most people associate the big pie metaphor with scarcity, and the you have your own pie for me helps me go, oh, I don't have to worry about the big scarcity pie for everybody. I have
And
a pie of my own.
excuse me, I'm going to sneeze.
We're gonna make people really hungry when they listen to this. Bless
Or
you.
they're definitely going to want to go somewhere and get pie.
Yeah, exactly.
But then also someone can be like, even if with their own pie, and they're like, well, I've already had this thing great, and this thing great, and this thing great. All those pieces are taken out. Oh my God, I only have 2 pieces left.
Yeah.
And then that's it. And I'm like 40 and I still have another 40 years to go. And it's like, no, even when you take a piece, the universe is replacing it and replacing it. There's always more.
And I mean, there's so many examples of this. I mean, we could do a 3 hour episode on this, but
Okay, let's.
one thing I let's not. One thing I definitely still struggle with, and I think a lot of people can relate to, is like if you're in a relationship and it ends, sad
Yeah, it's
about
a
it.
good
Like there's
one.
this thought that gets passed around of like, I'll never find love again.
I
The
know.
most
Yeah.
ridiculous thing on earth, because there's literally like 7 billion people on the planet, and like half of them are single. It's like,
Yeah.
are you serious? Like, what are you talking about? Like, humans are naturally attracted to each other. Like, sexual and romantic attraction is like one of the most natural things in the world. Like, if you're just out around meeting people, but it's one of those things where like you can feel like if you had something so special with someone, that was your piece of the pie, and
Yeah.
now
And
that
that could
that
never
piece of
happen
the pie is
again.
gone, there's no more pie left, and you're out. You're
Yeah.
done for your
Yeah.
life or whatever. And I
Yeah.
literally have heard people say that. I've heard people say to me like, "Oh, I had my one true love, so there's,
That's
I'm
it.
not going to get a second
I
one."
think I have that too. Or I have this, like when I do meet the man that my next relationship, I think I have this fear that it's not going to last very long.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is a deprivation, a scarcity.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's so good to be true that, well, then I can only have it for a little while. Like
Yeah.
here I was in a marriage, for a very long time and never thought like, oh my God, it wasn't what I really wanted. And yet I had it for a really long time. And not finding anything wrong, very little wrong with that.
Mhm.
And yet here to like, I did all this work to be single again. And then have that fear of like, oh, I'm gonna get what I want, but then I said it the other day, I'm like, yeah, and I want to be like Jerry and Esther, where they were together like 30 years or whatever. I'm like, yeah, because I'm 58. So yeah, if I call him Ben, if Ben and I are together for 30 years, that'll be awesome because I'll be like, I don't know if I'll meet him when I'm 60, I'll be 90, so
Yeah.
um, yeah. So
Yeah. I mean, I think I mean, I hope it's okay. I'm putting myself in with other people in general, but I mean, it happens with jobs. Like people will, because it's that belief that like we don't deserve another piece of the pie, or a bigger piece of the pie, right? Like people will stay in jobs for a long time and be very unhappy, and you talk to them and you go, well, if you're unhappy with your job, why don't you find another one? And they'll just have this list of like, oh, our industry is like really taking hits. They're not
yeah,
hiring.
yeah,
I mean, I have this benefit here, and no other company will have that benefit. I can't get that anywhere else. Or, I'm whatever. I'm invested in the retirement program, and it won't be the same anywhere else. And it's like all of that is just, and the thing is, I love when Abraham says those things could be true. Those things could be facts, but they don't mean what we think they mean. Like they don't mean that therefore there's no pie left for you. Like there's no way you could get this other job. I mean, it could. I mean, people can prove things all the time. Like if you want to be whatever, if you want to be, I'm just trying to think of a random profession I can't think of. But if you want to be like a medical lab technician, now you can go on the internet and you can look up like what is the current hiring rate for lab technicians.
yeah.
And it could say like, oh, the hiring rate is like 1,000 applications and resumes to every one person hired.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
odds are really bad.
And it does never talk about the vibrational part of that.
Right.
Which even in the jobs, it never talks about the vibrational aspect of the actors who do get the work.
Yeah.
Or look at these older actors like Kevin Costner and Helen Mirren and Harrison Ford, much older actors now, and they are still working. And it's like what their vibration is that of wanting to work. And so
Well,
they're getting these.
the story I always think of that is where it was the funny one it was on Oprah's Soul Sunday show. She had
Mhm.
John Bon Jovi, the rock singer, on.
Hmm.
He told this story of like literally he was at home in New Jersey one time after many years of being successful. He was out in the driveway of his mansion and he was washing his whatever, his Porsche or his Ferrari or whatever. And his next door neighbor, a guy who had a teenage son, came over and told him how happy he was because he just talked his teenage son out of wanting to be a professional bass player. And
Mm.
John Bon Jovi's like, I'm literally like, I have the cloth on the Ferrari that I bought with the money from my music, and he's telling me that his son shouldn't pursue music because there's no money. And it was like the most ridiculous, but like that's how we think. It's like,
yeah,
oh,
that
well,
story.
statistics.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the greatest gift a parent can give to a kid is just follow your inner guidance, because we've talked about before, Sammy Davis Jr., one of the most famous singers in the world, didn't want to be a singer when he grew up. Like he had to come to terms with that later. He got an appreciation for it, but he didn't want to be. He felt like he was being forced to be a
Yeah,
singer.
something that he didn't want to do.
I mean, it can go the other way too.
Yeah,
Like the most important thing is not to look at the odds or
yeah.
what's safe or what's
So
whatever,
that is
but
something that,
what feels right.
yeah, and that's something that in that video I sent you, Abraham was talking about, is that anything that is manifested is old news. And
Yeah,
I was like, what? Like,
yeah,
drop the mic, because so many of us, we talked about this in last week's episode about how we are so hooked on appearances,
yeah,
and what like this pencil is right here. And
yeah,
so therefore it exists because I can see it.
right.
And Abraham saying anything that is manifested is old news. And what's real, what the reality is what's in my vibrational escrow. That is who we really are. That blew my mind, because I've been so trained to believe in, here's this blue towel, it exists. Unless I'm always going to have this blue towel. And there's a purple towel in my future. I don't even know it because I can't see it, but it's this blue towel is, I remember when I wanted blue towels because I love this color.
Yeah,
But this is old news.
yeah.
And that purple towel is, my vibrational reality, and whatever else it may be. I'm just using that because it was in front of me, but um
It's funny too how our culture
that's
and
something to wrap around our brains, like, what?
it's always funny to me how our media and our culture, they like when like this is the thing about being a musician, drives me crazy. Um like when people do like a feature on a famous band, or like you see a documentary about a famous band, what they love to do is show interviews with people who say, well, I was there, when they were playing for 20 people, they just started out. And the minute I saw them, I just knew they were going to be huge. Because the reason that drives me crazy is because it's 2020, it's looking back. So in hindsight, it's like, well, of course, because now we know they're huge. Of course, when you saw them and you had that feeling, it would, oh, well, of course, they must have been destined to be that the entire time. There was never any doubt.
No, but have you ever had that feeling where you've seen someone
I
that was,
The thing is, I think the feeling is a good thing and is real. The problem is how people use that story afterwards to do the negative, which is, oh, well, I really love this thing, but because we're not having that kind of an experience, then I guess it won't work out in the future. It's
okay,
like, well, some other person isn't watching me and saying, oh, they're going to be huge, so I guess I'm not
okay,
going to be huge. And it's
got
like
it.
that's tracking the wrong thing from that story.
Right,
The
right.
tracking should be internally, do you feel good about what you're doing? Like, are you having
Yeah,
fun? Are you enjoying
yeah, yeah,
something you
yeah,
want to do? If you're following that, you're good no matter what anybody says about you. The
yeah.
odds,
I know, right? That inner compass.
but
Yeah,
people,
that
and
inner
myself very
emotional
much included,
guidance.
we have so much fear that we won't get what we want,
Yeah,
that we're looking for these indicators, and so often that story gets flipped around of like, oh, well, the only people that get to be famous musicians are people, these chosen few who,
yeah.
you can see it
No,
in their first
it's
show or
not.
whatever.
Yeah,
And it's like, and the other thing is like, the extrapolation there isn't true either, because there's plenty of bands who were terrible for their first year or two.
There's a lot of actors and musicians who are not very talented,
I mean,
and they are famous. So it has nothing to do
that too,
with
yeah,
talent.
yeah. It really,
Um,
that's I mean, I think the thing is like we get so caught up in, and it's our brains and our negative beliefs and all this stuff that we were raised with that cause this, but we get caught up in like, well, I'm going to check in with this external information about whether it's okay to do what I'm doing, or whether what I'm going to do is going to work out well. And it's like, as much as I can today, and it's a lifelong process, I just try to keep practicing, like, check out of that and just be like, everything in my life always works out for me.
I
Everything.
love that one. Yeah, things are always working out for me. Things are always working out for. And then talking about physical appearances, I remember years ago I had made the decision I wanted to buy myself a gemstone ring. And so I had seen something at, I think it was J.C. Penney or whatever. I was looking in their jewelry section. I'm like, oh, it was multicolored. And I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, oh, I can go to the jewelry building. There's this 6-story building downtown. And I went and I was looking around at all the gemstones. And one of the jewelers said, I was describing the one ring that I loved at J.C. Penney, and they're like, oh, that's not a real gemstone. They're like, they just put this coating over it to give it that multicolor. I was devastated because I really wanted that ring, but I wanted to go to the jewelry exchange to get it for less. And I walked away and I was so bummed, and I was super disappointed. Like, I'm not going to have that ring. It's not real. I'm never going to get what I want, blah, 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 blah. And I think it was maybe 6 months later, I was with a friend and we walked into this thrift store, and I'm looking at the case and I see this ring. It's purple. And I'm like, I'll go. I asked the woman behind the counter, I go, can I see that? And she goes, sure. And as she's handing it to me, I go, how much is it? And she said $5. And I put it on. It's an amethyst ring. And the band looks very kind of antique. And I show it fits, and I show my friend, and she goes, that's real. She goes, my dad was a jeweler. She's like, that's real. And the woman here is behind the counter, and I said, I'm going to take this. I go, you said $5, right? And the woman kind of has this like awful feeling across her face. And I hand the woman $5, and I put it on, and I'm like, I literally got the essence of what I wanted, because I originally thought I was going to have to pay $150 for what I wanted. I paid $5 for this, and I got what I wanted. And so it was really a great example of, just because something looks like we're not going to have it, or we really wanted that thing and we didn't, that we'll never get it. And that was a prime example of like, no, you're going to get what you want. It's just going to maybe look differently. And I had no resistance that day. Same thing happened when I bought my first MacBook Air. It was used on eBay. I bid on it. It had so many things I wanted, and I didn't get it. I was devastated. And like 2 months later, I got an even better MacBook Air. It was even better price, better everything. And it was just like, oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're going all over the place as usual, but it's a lot of really good points. That just sort of evokes for me the whole thing about avoiding the hows. Like, don't put conditions on the universe of how what you want can show up. It's like the more room you give the universe, like the easier it will come. But if you tell the universe, like, I need to have this car, and it has to happen on this day, and I have to pay this price for it, and this dealership has to have, if you're attached to all these conditions, you're limiting the universe so much. It's going to make it all the more hard for it to get sent to you. The more you can just be like, this is what I want, and I don't care how it comes, and I don't care when, and I don't care who brings it, whatever, like that, then you're just giving the universe like what it loves, which is like, oh, I'm gonna give it to you in this really surprising.
Full reign to deliver it to you
Yeah,
in any way
it's like something
possible.
cooler. I mean, the thing is, it's like you go to like, let's say we replay that story and change some details. So you go to the first store, and it isn't fake, it is real, and it's like really expensive. But then you go to the jewelry exchange, you pay $150, and you get the ring. Well, you got what you wanted. That's really cool. You're probably gonna be happy,
Yeah.
because you planned on that and it worked out the
Yeah.
way you thought.
Yeah.
The story of how you actually got it, not let's set aside the fact you saved $145, which is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Just the way that it came about and you
Yeah.
found it is so magical and interesting and fun.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like, dude, let the universe do that. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
okay, if you want to set all the conditions and try to force that into happening, good luck.
Yeah.
Even if you pull it off, it's not going to be as enjoyable. But if you can just give the universe free reign, like just sit back and prepare to be dazzled, you know?
Ah, I love that. Sit back. That's got to be one of our titles.
But it's so like I remember growing up, and I don't mean to be critical of anyone, but I mean I know that some of it came from a good place. You know, some of this, you know, some things that people said to me, adults said to me when I was a kid. You know, I know some of it was because they cared about me, they wanted me to be okay, they were
Absolutely.
concerned about my well-being and everything. But it's also there was this element of fear of like being afraid that my life wouldn't work out or being afraid that something bad would happen to me. And so they would kind of grill me sometimes. I remember getting grilled a lot as a kid, like when I would if I wanted something or I had an idea about my future, like these adults would grill me about like, well, how do you know? And like, how do you think it's going to happen? And like, what are you going to do to blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, man, like we just really be great if we'd stop doing that to each other, whether it's adults, kids, whatever. I feel
Well,
like,
and to ourselves. I think I kind of do that
oh,
too. Because
100%.
I'm like, I'm like, okay, well, I would love to keep, there's a part of me that would love to keep Nibbles, at least keep him in my life so I can see him regularly like I have been. And
Yeah.
I'm like, how? How? But how? I don't know how. Like, Steph, tell me how. Like, that's because you don't know how, it's not possible. And it's like, that's not true. I don't know how about a lot of things and they still happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, you know, and I know people tend to glorify Steve Jobs a lot and ignore some of the more difficult parts of his life and his abuse of his workers and things, and you know, but that was real, and I don't want to skip over that. But I mean, I think that's the thing when I hear his story about you know the iPod and the iPhone and things like that, like and the Macintosh originally. Like the good part of that story that I think is helpful for me to borrow from is like he didn't know how the Mac was going to be made. He didn't know how
Mm,
the iPod was going to happen. He didn't know how the iPhone was going to happen.
yeah.
Bill Burr, the comedian, has a really great comedy routine that's on YouTube about how he thinks Steve Jobs just didn't do anything because he like Steve Jobs just walked into rooms where engineers were and said, "Build me this thing now," you know, he didn't really do anything. But and then there's some truth to that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, the thing part of it is like I think the thing about the Steve Jobs story in particular is you've got to have like the belief in the possibility of something happening
Mm,
because otherwise people will tell you it's not going to happen. Like
yeah.
everywhere, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the number two at Apple for a long time that founded it with him, they literally like they were told by electronics experts throughout the country, like high level executives at places, you know, big name companies, no one is ever going to want a computer in their home ever.
Yeah,
Like you guys are insane and you need to stop and get like a real job and
yeah,
do something with statistically successful future.
yeah.
And they were literally like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were literally like branded as kooks in the field of electronics for a long time because they had this
Yeah,
idea of like computers in people's homes. And it's like
mhm,
you think about how ridiculous that is right now. It's like we can't
yeah.
do anything in this world with
I know, I
our
know.
Macs and our
And
iPhones.
to have one in our hands,
Yeah. And it's
yeah.
like,
And we just take it for granted now. Like, of course.
but that's the thing. It's like, don't track the house, don't track statistics, don't track what other people tell you, or, you know, that's just track how does it feel to me,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And know that anything that is manifested is old news.
Yeah.
And that what you want is, even though we can't see it and touch it, it exists. It exists. It's there. It's coming.
Yeah. Great discussion. This was a fun episode. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy you did listening to us or watching us today. Remember that right now we're posting a brand new episode for you every single Monday morning. We truly appreciate you doing whatever your platform allows you to do to support the podcast. All our social media links and our email address is down in the doodly doo and the YouTube video version below. We wish you a happy and abundant week, and we look forward to you joining us again on the next awesome episode of Co-Creation Station. Bye, everybody.
Bye.